with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, morimuli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you are joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Join us right now for one of the most beautiful places in the entire world, right outside of Halifax, in the beautiful province of Nova Scotia in Canada. Our guest today is here to celebrate her brand new book. It's called Oakley The Squirrel, Camping 1, 2, 3. Please welcome to the show, Nancy Rose. Hey, Nancy, how are you?
I am fantastic, and what a great introduction. Thank you so much.
Well, I am telling you, I was sharing with Nancy that I absolutely love the province of Nova Scotia. I had the pleasure of visiting a number of times, one of which was an epic bike journey by myself back when I was 20 or 19 or something like that, when I was way too young to know better. And just had a wonderful time, met so many people, and I shared just a couple of the adventures that I had with Nancy before we started. There were so many more. It was like a different adventure every day. It was just wonderful.
Great. You'll need a podcast on that one of these days.
I think so. And, yeah, the statute of limitations has run out, so I think I'd be okay to sharing a lot of those in the podcast. In the meantime, share with us what Oakley the Squirrel is all about.
Oakley the Squirrel is my 6th book about squirrels, and they're no ordinary squirrels. Oakley is a rather unusual squirrel, like his cousins and his friends, and in this book, they go camping. So Oakley has a little miniature camper, his friends have a tent, and off they go to Camp Chitter-Chatter, where they'll spend a few days playing it outdoors, at the beach. And the big thing is they begin off by unpacking all their trailer and their stuff that they bring, and then they're going to count all the different things they bring. So it's a counting book for kids, but it's about camping. So it's not just a plain counting book.
Well, that is really wonderful, and I know my son right now is approaching his 30th birthday, but I have so many vivid memories of every time we went up and down the stairs. We were living on the second floor when he was born, and every time we went up the stairs, we counted. Usually in the count from Sesame Street's voice. 1, 2, 3, ah, ah, ah. And I don't remember now how many steps there were, but there were a lot, but I knew it back then. And it seemed like every time we went to a store or went anywhere, we would always be counting. And to this day, he's a math genius. I just assume that we helped his journey along way back then, or maybe it was he just had a natural affinity and love for numbers. But just such a beautiful memory that you helped me recall. And I know that this would be a great way for families to start creating their own memories around counting and around math.
I think so. I mean, I think most parents automatically teach their children to count. And you buy books, and it'll have, 1 truck or 2 balls or whatever. But a lot of them are quite elementary. And people think of counting as something that you're going to teach a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. But I've got a grandson with Down syndrome, so he learns a little more slowly. And now that he's 9, he's still missing a couple of numbers. So it's neat that he enjoys the outdoors tremendously. He loves watching the squirrels in my place. And they have a camper, and so he goes camping. And so he's involved in the book because there's more than just a number and a picture. There is a little summary at the end that sort of shows what was in the book, but there's lots of little things for the kids to look at. And it's all photographs. I make miniatures. little miniature furniture. I made the little miniature camper trailer, and then I put them out on my deck. And well, actually, these were all done on a picnic table, covered with big grass, with a nice natural background. I hide the little peanuts, and I just wait for the squirrels to come along and get in the right location. I have to sort of plan what the picture is going to look like. And while they're finding their peanuts, hopefully they're interacting with one of the props, and hopefully I get a good sharp photo in the right time. I take lots.
Well,
there's always lots to choose from.
I imagine. And you must be very thankful now that we live in the age of digital photography and you're not having to go and process all that film.
That would be a nightmare. Yes, in fact, my interest in squirrels started when I got a digital camera, so that I was able to make lots of mistakes. And you just delete. My son got me, did all the technical stuff, how to set up the computer part, and then I did the creative stuff. And I've always loved crafts, so making the little props was just as much fun as taking the pictures. It's hard to find squirrel-sized furniture, so you have to make it.
I imagine that must be difficult. Talk about a labor of love. How much time goes into creating a book like this, between the creating the props and setting the scene and taking the pictures?
Quite a bit. My first couple of books were actually, I call them backwards. I had a lot of the photos done, and then once the publisher showed interest, then I kind of put the photos together into a story and then added photos. This one follows another board book by Workman, Oakley the Squirrel, The Search for Zed, which is an alphabet story. 26 different items as he goes through his alphabet. So this one, when they said, let's do a counting book, I thought, okay. But I had to set everything up. I had to make it all so it was done. I had to get the text right first because it's got rhyme, and then do the photos. It probably took a couple of months, which was actually pretty fast.
Yeah.
Weather is a big thing, so there's only certain days I can take the photos. If it's too windy, things blow away, and if it's raining, you can't go out. So, but I ended up with a nice stretch of weather in September, October, and managed to get most of the photos that I needed without too much trouble. It was good.
That's wonderful. That really is wonderful. What is it about squirrels that you love so much?
I don't know. They're just intriguing. They're so curious and unpredictable, but at the same time, when they stand in a scene, they've got little arms, and they kind of have that little anthropomorphic look. They look like little people. They can pick things up, and every now and then they'll do something so fun and surprising that I just keep wanting to do more. Like I had scenes, one of the first times that I was really thrilled with the picture was a squirrel reached up and put his paw, see, I say hand, they're my people, on a little miniature envelope that I had in a little miniature mailbox. And he just looked exactly like he was taking the letter out of the mailbox. And the fact that I got that perfect pose made me want to try again. So every time I get a really good shot of him interacting in a very human way, it just sort of spurs me on to want to do more. And they're just so cute. I mean, gee. And we have the little red squirrels, and I think they're cuter than the big squirrels.
Yeah, I have to be honest with you. Here in our beautiful home, we have way too many squirrels, and my wife is not a fan because they like humans, they like to go into our trash and they always eat the bird seed. My wife bought me this beautiful bird feeder, and the squirrels just decided that they didn't like the way it was designed, and they redesigned it using their teeth and all this other kind of stuff. But I do know that my kids loved watching all the antics of the squirrels in the backyard as they were growing up. So I imagine that little kids are going to love the pictures and seeing a squirrel. And I think they'd be able to tell that this is a real photograph of a real squirrel as opposed to an illustration.
Mm-hmm. And that's the interesting thing. I do a lot of school visits with Nova Scotia Writers in the Schools program. And it is funny to listen to the children at certain ages, like the primaries and the grade ones, can't quite figure out if that scene that's in my book is actually out in the woods somewhere. It's kind of like Santa Claus and the Elf on the Shelf. There's some little uncertainty between what's real and what's fantasy. And they really believe it. And parents will tell me afterwards, oh, they loved your presentation and now they're wanting to go to the woods to see if they can find his trailer. So that's really fun when I get those interactions. But every kid seems to have a story about a squirrel because it's one of the first wild animals that most kids actually see, unless they've been taken to a zoo or something.
No, but you're absolutely right. That is the animal that most kids will see in their lives, and it's certainly the animal they see most often when they're young.
Yeah, depending on where they live, I guess. But,
yeah. Have you ever thought of using other animals, perhaps the birds that land in your backyard? That maybe the squirrels eat their food, but.
For every scene that I have photos of squirrels, I have photos with blue jays. Blue jays are pretty common, and they're almost like the alerter to the squirrels. The squirrels will say, oh, there must be something going on because the blue jays have just flown in and got peanuts. So they'll fly in. Sometimes my little props get picked up by the squirrels, and they carry them up a tree as if it's a nut. And the blue jays will think the squirrel's hiding a nut. So he'll fly in and knock the peanut out of the tree, and I'm able to retrieve my prop or whatever it's been. Where I live, it's about 15 kilometers outside the city, and so it's a large lot. There are a lot of deer that come through, so I have done some scenes with deer in them. Obviously, the props have to be much bigger. More things like snowman and a Thanksgiving table all set. I have a lot of ringneck pheasants that come through. Lots of different birds. So I thought about others, and people will say, oh, you're going to do a book about blue jays, but they just sort of don't have the cute factor because they don't have little arms to pick things up. They can't push the little baby stroller or take the mail out of the mailbox, except with their beak, I guess. Yeah, but there's just something about the squirrel. Soft and fuzzy, I think, more appealing.
Now, did you always dream of being a children's author?
No, in fact, it's I call myself just an accidental author. I was a high school guidance counselor, and once I got that digital camera, I was just, taking pictures to learn how to use the camera. The squirrels were right there in the backyard. I didn't have to go anywhere. It was a great way for me to meditate, sort of relax after a day of dealing with students and their problems. It was just a nice way to de-stress. And I could do it. It was great during COVID because, all my friends couldn't do the weddings and the group photos, and my subjects were still there. But no, I never really planned to be an author. It was just an accident. My images got shown in a newspaper article in Toronto, and an agent contacted me, and I submitted something to her, and it kind of went from there. So I'm very lucky, very blessed.
Wow, that is amazing. Well, very blessed, yes. Very lucky, yes. But I believe that luck goes to people who work at it.
You got to work hard.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. Hey, if you don't mind, we've had a lot of educators here on the podcast. I don't think, we've had a couple of educators from Canada, from Ontario, on the show. I don't think we've had a guidance counselor. What's the if you could just, because we do have a lot of parents and whatnot that are interested, what's the education system like in Nova Scotia, and how do you, if you know, how do you imagine it differs from what's happening here in the States?
I don't know if it's that much different. A lot of our programs sometimes are sort of copies of things that are done in the States. People go off. I've gone to conferences. I went to a conference in San Francisco one year and whatever. I think there's a lot of similarities, except it is, for the most part, a public school system. We don't have charter schools or privates. Well, we do have private schools. And counselors now are in most schools starting, well, even in elementary, but for the most part, a lot of them are in high schools where we'll do anything from, personal counseling. Stress, anxiety are big issues these days with kids. And then we'll do academic and, post-secondary kind of planning and counseling around that, career planning as well. But most of it ends up being kind of personal stuff.
Yeah.
Kids go through a lot these days.
They certainly do. They certainly do. And they go through a lot no matter where they are in the world. And it's wonderful that they have somebody like you to help them. I'm wondering, did you ever have the idea that maybe we could use our squirrels to help our high school kids chill out a little bit and be less anxious?
It's really funny you should say that, because I did, when I first had my photos, it was like, now what am I going to do with all these? And I found one of these giant picture frames that's for a collage. It would hold about 20 pictures. So I mounted all my cute photos and put the big frame on the wall in my office. And a student would come in, head down, feeling glum, and they'd sit down in the chair, and then the eyes would gradually come up, and they'd look up, and you'd see the look on their face would start to change. It's like, you like squirrels? Are those real? And then they'd start to smile. I had, one very reluctant student who was sent to see me and didn't want to be there. So he sat very solemnly and wasn't going to speak at all. And when he looked at the pictures, then the expression changed, and we got into a big conversation about the squirrels, and his whole demeanor changed. He just saw me as somebody completely different than his other teachers. And he came back 2 days later with a miniature toilet that he borrowed from his sister's Barbie collection. He thought I'd like to have it for my squirrels. So I did use it in a photo. But from then on, he was quite willing to come to my office. I was the nutty guidance counselor.
And nutty in a couple of ways. You had those nuts out for the squirrels, and hey, you bring up something. Now, I've been doing educational magic shows in schools here in the States and Puerto Rico for over 30 years, and one of the things that always it surprised me the first time it happened. It surprises people when they see it. When a number of times I've been invited into a middle school. And sometimes it's a middle school where they just get to notice it. Oh, this guy is coming, and they have no idea what's going on. And then I get there, and I'm very silly and clown-like. And a lot of times, especially in inner city schools, in fact, I had one principal get up, and the way he introduced me was, I have no idea why somebody would have brought this person to you, but they're here. It's only going to be 45 minutes, so just be quiet and pay attention. Don't cause trouble. And I imagine he expected the show to bomb. Instead, I came out in front of these inner city 8th graders, and they just became like little kids, and they loved it. What do you think it is? We have this image of teenagers, and especially kids in the cities, and they're tough, and they got this facade, and you can't reach them, and whatever you're doing with them has to be kind of gritty and adult, and it can't be juvenile in any way. But I'm finding, and maybe you found it too with your squirrel pictures, it's like when you give those kids permission to be kids, something really magical happens. They relax and really just kind of fall in love.
Exactly. And it is interesting because teachers will think, because my books are marketed for younger kids, that maybe I should only speak to the younger kids when I come to a school. But I say, well, your older students are learning to write, and we can talk about that. So when I have the older students, like the grades, usually it's still in elementary school, so it might go up to grade 6. But grade 6s are so fascinated. I might have to introduce the book and say, now this book is marketed for younger students. But, if you were reading it to your younger brother or sister, what parts of this would you like, etc. But they get so involved, and then they spin off on I'll say, what other adventures could Mr. Peanuts or Oakley go on? And the stories they come up with are just amazing. And they just need that permission. They're still kids at heart. They just need the permission to just kind of let their hair down. And you'll see a few of them sort of sitting there like, I'm really enjoying this. Am I supposed to show that on my face? I didn't know they're enjoying it. And just the fact that it's a kid's book, but it's okay. And then the librarians will tell me afterwards that the grade sixes were the first ones in to try to get your books off the shelf.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's always fun to hear.
Absolutely. Hey, another thing I just want to touch on really quickly is that you mentioned that your grandson was a big part in the creation of these books, and that he just happens to have Down syndrome. We love celebrating Down Syndrome Awareness Month here, and could you just take a moment, because we hear in certain countries, there was a few years back, I don't want to make a mistake and name the wrong country by accident, but there was a country or two that was kind of bragging and celebrating that we no longer have Down syndrome kids here. We solved the problem. And I think that was a really sad and unfortunate way to think, because I think kids and adults with Down syndrome are pretty awesome and bring a lot to the world. Can you share a little bit about the joy that your grandson has brought into your family?
Oh, it's amazing. You sort of have the stereotypical view of kids with Down syndrome as happy all the time, but boy, this little guy, he's got all the moods. And he is so determined and stubborn at times, and the little qualities that might drive you nuts, but you know that is going to be such a strength. He's always so happy to see me when he arrives. Hi, Nanny, I'm back. And he and his little brother come over every Friday after school. But little things like his understanding that, well, these are homemade props that Nanny made and they're not just toys. He may not be quite as careful with things, but other days he's unpredictable. He might be so gentle, but in general, I don't let them play with the props because unfortunately his other brother is allergic to nuts. And so I've had peanuts in most things, but he completely understands and he'll just always ask first. But, but no, the little one with Down syndrome is just the most adorable. As a child, I babysat a lot. And they have a lower muscle tone. So when you pick up a baby with Down syndrome, they melt onto you. And when the second child came along, I thought, oh, this is just not as much fun. He's just wiggly and stiff, but he's not melting onto me like my first one did. And my heart just died when it just was the best thing ever that happened to me to have him in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really happy that you're able to share that with us, and I'm really happy that you're able to share Oakley the Squirrel with the world. Where can people go to find out more about Oakley and find out more about you?
Well, my website is The Secret Life of Squirrels, just secretlifeofsquirrels.com. And my Facebook page is Secret Life of Squirrels. I have another Facebook page, Nancy Rose. There's lots of Nancy Roses, but you'll find squirrels on mine. And Instagram, I think, is Nancy Rose Loves Squirrels. The books are sold, Barnes & Noble, chapters in Canada, and certainly everything's on Amazon these days. And a lot of independent bookstores. I've come across a lot in the States that have been selling the books, and different people write me from all over the country that they've found the book in a local store, so that's nice. And Workman Publishing, I believe, sells the books themselves as well.
And of course, if your local independent bookstore doesn't have Oakley on the shelves, you can just ask very politely, and I'm sure they'll have it there within a day or two. Same thing with your public library, and that's actually a huge help for an author and also for the other folks in your community to, just request that a library stock a book like Oakley the Squirrel, Camping 1, 2, 3.
That's a great point. Thank you.
We've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator, photographer, prop maker of Oakley the Squirrel, Camping 1, 2, 3. Our guest has been Nancy Rose. Nancy, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and we hope that you'll join us for the next exciting episode of the show. To make sure you don't miss a moment of the show, please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. Big thanks going out to my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Brady, Jordan Saley, Will Cheever, Cassandra Masonet, Stephanie Davila. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.